Day 541 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia is sitting on more than 256,000 military personnel losses there, representing an additional 460 in the past 24 hours. Then as for hardware losses, 3 tanks, 12 APVs, and a whopping 24 artillery. And you can also see there the 2 helicopters. So note for those 2 Russian choppers, the Ka-52 attack helicopters. Now, although those 2 losses actually occurred yesterday, but they missed the daily loss report cutoff time, and as such are displaying on today's report instead. So the first one happened in the morning near Bakhmut yesterday, which I already reported on. Then the second one later on in the day near the Zaporizhia front lines occurred there with a Swedish manpad. And losses like these are important for a number of reasons. Firstly, they're the best attack helicopters that Russia has to offer. Secondly, there has already been 42 confirmed Russian losses of this aircraft, out of a potential 90 or so in their entire armament. Thus, ghastly figures like these can pose significant risks to Russia's capability to project aerial power in this war, such as limited capabilities to perform airstrikes and ground support functions. Plus, it takes about 12 months to produce these aircraft, and they always only ever produce them in limited numbers in any year, say on average 10 per year. And that was before the international sanctions came into play. Then we'll head across to the map today, and we'll start out once again in Russia, as we sometimes do, as the mayor of Moscow announced that air defenses intercepted a Ukrainian drone overnight, with the remaining debris falling over the city's expo center or convention center, damaging the roof. And yet, meanwhile, most people are still asking the question, how did a slow-flying moped travel hundreds of miles all the way from Ukraine to Russia's capital undetected, or at least just intercepted at the very last moment? And it continues to blow my mind about the widely accepted notion that Moscow had some of the best or the most protected airspace in the entire globe. Prior to this war at least, being that it is home to the Russian S-400 system, amongst other Russian air defense platforms. But as it turns out, that widely accepted notion no longer holds up to scrutiny. Then moving on, and since I'm still on the Russian map, I may as well mention, so another day, another fire, this time at an ice arena, which caught fire in the Yekaterinburg region in closer to central Russia. And I wouldn't normally even mention this event because it doesn't really seem war-related, as far as I know, but I couldn't pass up mentioning the face value irony of how an ice arena is on fire in Russia. Then we'll head back to the Ukrainian map today, as in the past day, Russian forces performed 3 unsuccessful offensive operations within 3 different oblasts. Now, the first was in the Kupiansk direction, which borders Kharkiv and Luhansk. And as you look at the geographical topography on the map here, it's widely accepted that Russia would, in the least, like to advance their forces all the way up to the Oskol River to have, at bare minimum, something of a buffer zone for the occupied Luhansk Oblast that they hold, or they hold about 95% of. Then we'll briefly move down to Soledar, which is just north of Bakhmut. So it was reported from Ukrainian drone footage in the last day that a Russian soldier stepped on a landmine which had a secondary detonation of an anti-tank mine. And I bring all of this up not to laugh, but to make a larger point of how this war is turning into an area of denial war. where he who both successfully deploys and successfully neutralizes enemy mines will start to have the natural advantage in the war. Oh, and not to mention, your army needs to have the sufficient information and communication infrastructure to have the situational awareness to, not step on your own mines, which normally takes a minimum degree of military intelligence to avoid that outcome. Then moving to the south, as this is an additional axis of attack where Ukraine repelled a Russian counterattack against the recently liberated settlement of Uruzane. And I find it interesting the way that this works, because usually within about 24 hours of a Ukrainian town liberation, Russian commanders always seem to, just like clockwork, order the counterattack to reclaim the lost land, which I don't really remember ever working for them. And so these types of Russian actions appear to be a forced reactionary approach by the Russian commanders who, I postulate, have to make it appear like they didn't give up the settlement without at least a follow-up fight, for fear of a demotion or getting sent to the front lines themselves to try to fix the frontline problems, which, as every Russian commander already knows, is much worse than a demotion. Then, just briefly for the region, there were some explosions reported at the port in occupied Berdyansk, so I'll try to zoom out for that one there. So, never a dull day in the rears for the Russian forces stationed there. And again, it is outside of the range of a HIMARS strike, so likely another Storm Shadow or Scalp EG. Then moving a little bit further south, really to the Black Sea. So the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that yesterday evening, Ukraine tried to attack its patrol ships, the Pytlivi and the Vasily Baikov, all right there in the Black Sea with a naval drone or drones, Ukrainian naval drones. And as the story goes, the Russian MOD also claimed that it was destroyed by the onboard armaments. But in reality, I'm not yet convinced any part of this story is true so far. So all I ask is, let's see the footage, as we've definitely seen before how various arms of the Russian military like to send a lot of success reports, as I like to call them now, up the chain of command in an effort to look competent and even get bonuses and promotions in what has been considered as some sort of backwards and solely reports-based fake meritocracy that the Russian military has in many, many ways shown itself to be during this war. Then we'll head across to some news for today. So the big news of the day, of course, is that the US has approved the sending of the F-16 fighter jets from Denmark and the Netherlands to Ukraine after their training is complete in those areas. In fact, Ukraine's foreign minister is so confident on this now that he said the trained pilots may actually be returning to Ukraine with the F-16s. But not actually returning in the cockpits themselves, but rather as a synchronized process right after training. And as for the training completion date, well, looks to be like a minimum of 3 to 6 months. But even then, the battle space could change so much in that length of time with new Ukrainian offensive capabilities, homegrown designs, talking the drones and things of that nature. So anything could happen between now and then. Then in some other hardware-related news, Ukrainian sappers, so those who perform a very important mine-clearing role, have been upgrading their mine-clearing tactics with use of new thermal imaging that allows them to spot the mined locations in what appears to be a newly effective methodology for them. So this tactic works such that as the evening time commences, the mines essentially cool down at a slower rate than their surrounding natural environment, thus making them much easier to spot. And so when using this technique in combination with other methods such as traditional mine clearers and now even drone-dropped munition mine clearers also, all making innovations like these giving a advantageous edge on the battlefield. as opposed to, an army that instead steps on their own mines. Then in some other news, Turkey has warned Russia not to perform any more escalatory actions in the Black Sea, as happened the other day when Russia boarded a civilian Turkish ship in uncontested waters. And a warning like this from Turkey should send some chills down Russia's spine, surely, as the last time Turkey made a warning of a military nature to Russia, they stuck to their guns, literally, and shot down a Russian Su-24 military aircraft with an F-16 back in 2015 after it violated Turkish airspace for a mere 17 seconds near the border with Syria. So Russia would really ideally comply with Turkish demands, especially given that Turkey controls the Bosphorus Straits, which means they control access in and out of the Black Sea. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder segment, I'll make this a quick one, but Russian soldiers from Perma-Kray who voluntarily came to wage war against Ukraine are complaining about the lack of financial support, aka salaries as they call them, and perhaps realize now that they just got duped. Although still unlikely, considering that they've created an appeal video like we've seen so many of before, which then therefore likely suggests that they feel that some terrible and accidental accounting error has befallen them. But no, this was by design. Now, usually I have a lot more compassion for those Russians that were forced into Ukraine, but these guys, these voluntary soldiers, well, I'm really having a hard time extending compassion to these ones in this instance. Then as for a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys, so this is some stills from a video where Ukrainians are laughing at the quality of Russian equipment they found after our town's liberation. They note some rusty weaponry, and in particular useless body armor, which appears to be far from bulletproof. And I'd make a joke about this being some airsoft vest, but Russian soldiers have literally been equipped with airsoft vests as a means of body armor in this war already. And I reported on that last year. Also, the helmets weren't much better. They were having a bit of a laugh at those as well, and they didn't seem to hold up to much of any impact. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there on the next one. Cheers.